We are down to the final days, the final hours, John, and I saw this report out there that the Browns have known for about a month now who they're going to take. They told the owner a couple of weeks ago, and they just told the coach just a day or two ago. So who have you heard the rumor? Has Whisper Down the Lane reached you?
Yeah, 6 weeks they've had Baker Mayfield as the number one pick in the NFL draft, which is a bit of a surprise. I mean, sort of the quarterback position is, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So it's a guy you like, and evidently they have a conviction about him, and he's going to be the pick. As far as not telling the coach, though, I don't know about that, because in theory you could have spent that 6 weeks trying to cobble together an offense with that particular quarterback in mind. So to me, I mean, they're trying to stop Hugh Jackson from telling Mike Silver. That's basically it. And it kind of tells you that they don't believe in Hugh Jackson to be the long-term coach there, which if they don't, they should have already made a change.
Yeah, so according to reports that they think that Jackson has loose lips, that they think he was going to basically ruin, as you just kind of indicated there. They thought he was going to ruin the secret, and I agree that probably shows they don't have a lot of confidence in him.
No, it doesn't. And as I said, it's really, he's very close with one reporter, and they're basically best friends. So he probably would have leaked it. So I'm not saying they're wrong. But, again, when you have the number one pick in the draft, unless you're looking to trade out, it doesn't really matter. I mean, in the past, people have, told you their conviction and said, we're taking this guy, and signed them to the contract in years past. So a lot of it doesn't matter unless you're trying to spin it off, and I suppose there's some strategy involved because they're also picking number 4 as well. You could possibly try to get the Jets to maybe move up to get a quarterback they want, but that was always going to be unlikely. So it's going to be Baker Mayfield, and unfortunately for Baker Mayfield, he's probably going to go through his rookie season, and we'll see how much he plays because they did bring in Tyrod Taylor, but then he'll probably start again with a new coaching staff next year.
So Baker Mayfield, number one, are you surprised by that, and where do you have him in this group? Now, because we indicated yesterday we were talking about this class, being comparable to that 83 class. I guess maybe in numbers, maybe not so much talent, but where do you have Mayfield on your list of quarterbacks, and are you surprised that the Browns, with all of these quarterbacks to select, are going Mayfield?
Yeah, I am surprised. I think the conventional wisdom around the NFL is Sam Darnold is the best prospect, and then you sort of mix and match from there. A lot of people like the skill set of Josh Allen. A lot of people think Josh Rosen is the most game ready to play as a rookie. But when you're talking about those 4 particular quarterbacks, I would have Mayfield at 3 or 4. And there's no doubt that Josh Allen has better physical skills for the position, but Baker's probably more advanced, certainly more accurate. Either way, though, they're all legitimate prospects. So I don't necessarily downgrade the talent in this draft, and I think evidence of it is starting to unfold as we get closer to the draft. So many teams are trying to move up. Everybody knows the Bills, the Broncos now think they could potentially move up to get Sam Darnold. You have the Patriots. You have the Saints. You have even the Dolphins potentially trying to move up to get quarterbacks. All these organizations trying to move up to get in position to get one of these quarterbacks, that tells you a lot.
John, I saw your Eagles-only mock draft that you posted on 97.3 ESPN.com, and you have I like how you put plans A, B, and C are for the Eagles to trade down. pretty sure that's probably what's going to happen. But you did have them taking a linebacker there if somebody told them you can't move, you have to take number 32. Explain why you think a linebacker is where the Eagles might go first with that spot, and what other position do you think might be viewed as more of the need that they go after early in the draft?
Well, it's not necessarily. I mean, that's one of the good things you got to be in the Super Bowl champions. You generally don't have a ton of needs, and I think that kind of defines the Eagles. In the case of Van Der Esch, I mean, that's a player I know they like a lot, and most people have him going before number 32. And ultimately, I do think he does go before 32, but there's been this scuttlebutt around the league that he has a bit of a spinal stenosis issue, a cervical issue, and a couple sources told me the Eagles are kind of one of those teams trying to throw that out there to get other teams to pass on him, so he falls to them. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but that's the kind of subterfuge you often see going on in the draft. You saw it with Josh Allen today in the text. These leaks at the very last moment tend to happen for a reason, and that's because teams are trying to jockey and hoping these types of players fall to where they're at or fall to a position to where they can get to. If you're looking at positions as a whole, tackle, offensive tackle, I don't think the Eagles are sold on Halapoulivaati Vaitai as the ultimate, no doubt about it, type of replacement for Jason Peters, so they could use an heir apparent there. They could use a running back because I don't think, to be honest, they're going to work out extension with Jay Ajayi. I think it's going to be 1 year and done. And ultimately, if they do trade down, which I expect them to do, I think they will go get that running back, who then they have under a cost-effective deal for 4 years.
One other thought I wanted to get out of you, John. If you look up the Parkway here at the Giants, they're sitting in a very interesting spot, and I think a lot of their fans are living on pins and needles right now about who they may take and what that indicates about the direction of what they're trying to do. How do you see the Giants playing this out, and how much maybe 3, 4, 5 years down the road do we look back at this draft and say, boy, the Giants nailed this, or this was a turning point in them continuing to have
Scott,
trouble?
on that, with Mayfield going number 1, John, has that really forced the Giants into taking Darnold?
Well, yeah, it's interesting because the narrative coming from all the New York guys, and I text with them a lot, texted with a bunch of the reporters today, it's always been that the Giants only like one quarterback, and that's Sam Darnold. And the assumption was the Browns were going to take him, and that's where everyone kind of defaulted to Saquon Barkley going number 2 overall. Now they're going to have the opportunity to take Sam Darnold. And all of a sudden, same people are saying Giants want to trade out. They want to get out of number 2 and potentially trade down. Denver would be, that's a position where Denver could kind of jump up from 5 to 2 because they really like Sam Darnold. If that's happened, I think that has Quentin Nelson written all over it for the Giants. They love him. I think he's the best position player in the draft. But, you know, I mentioned all those teams trying to get quarterbacks, trying to trade up to get quarterbacks. You have this quarterback-heavy draft in the top 10 where you're likely going to have 4 guys go in the top 5 or 6 picks ultimately after somebody trades up. And the New York Giants aren't interested in any of them. It doesn't make any sense. I'm perplexed by it all.
Sports Bash here on 97.3 ESPN. John, what happens if the Giants take a quarterback? Then what happens to Saquon Barkley? Could he plummet in that draft and fall like a stone, like a rock in the water?
No, you're going to see a mini slip for either one, Barkley or Darnold, who doesn't go number 2. But it's only going to be a mini slip. They're not going to fall out of the top 10 or anything of that nature. But obviously, when you talk about falling from 2 to 5 or 6 or somewhere in that range, That's a little bit of a mini slip, and I think you're going to see that for one of those two players, the one that doesn't get picked, because I think the Jets are ultimately going to go Josh Rosen. I think the Browns are going to go Bradley Chubb. And then we mentioned the Broncos at 5. Are they trading up to get Darnold? Are they staying put? That's kind of the linchpin, and it has been the linchpin of this draft, is the Giants pick.
Talking with John McMullen. Follow him on Twitter at JFMcMullen. And, of course, the NFL draft is tonight, and everything really holds, if the Browns do go Mayfield and then the Giants are in an interesting spot, they probably would take Darnold. Then if he is on the board there, the Jets, John, everybody knows the Jets moved up. They want to take a quarterback. But did they have one in particular that they liked, and will that quarterback be there when they're ready to go?
Well, I think originally when they moved up, it was the intent on getting Baker Mayfield at number 3. But I think part of that was the assumption that Darnold was going to be gone at number 1. And potentially Josh Allen gone. Now they're going to have probably their at least pick of 2 of the 3. And the decision could come down to Josh Rosen or Josh Allen. And ultimately, from people in New York, I think they like Josh Rosen better. But we'll see how that shakes out as well.
John, earlier when we were talking about the Eagles possibly moving down, and you mentioned running backs, if Geis, Michael, and Ronald Jones are all 3 available for the Eagles, say early in the second round, if that's where they move to, which of the 3 do you like and why?
I like Ronald Jones the best for the Eagles because I think he's the one who could do more damage eventually as a pass receiver as well. And I think ultimately they want to get to a position where they have a 3-down back and they do not have to go with this committee set up. Obviously, it worked for him last year, so it's not like it's a major need. But I do think over the long term, and Scott, Doug said he had specific plays sort of in the offense for specific backs. Eventually, teams are going to figure that out, and those tendencies are going to be an issue if you keep building the offense that way. So I think they want to get a well-rounded guy. And I think at least from a projection standpoint, Jones would be the one most likely to be the best, the most well-rounded, even if he's not maybe the best pure runner.
If you had to name, Howie likes to do some of these deals that involve players. We all know, of course, Michael Kendricks has been on the trading blocks for years. Which one player could possibly move in a trade with the Eagles, do you think?
Well, I think the most likely remains Michael Kendricks, and I do think the Eagles want to move him. I don't think there's any question about that. I think Michael would like to be moved because he wants to play. And the reality is that Jordan Hicks is going to be back. He's going to be healthy, and only 2 linebackers can play a significant amount of snaps in this defense, and that's going to be Jordan Hicks and Nigel Bradham. And remember, the Eagles also signed Corey Nelson. He's not a big name in free agency, but he's a weak side linebacker who can play on special teams. And when you're that third linebacker only playing 25% of the snaps, you got to be one of those core 4 special teams coverage guys, and that's what Nelson does. Michael does not do that. So I think from both sides it makes sense to trade him. And at some point, because of his contract, the Eagles have said in the past they don't want to give him away, and I understand that because he is a good football player. But the reality is, because of his contract, you're not going to get the value fans might think for the type of player he is.
So Cleveland has 2 picks in the top 5. They also go number 4. So what happens for them? They'll get their quarterback, and then what?
Yeah, I think they're going to get Bradley Chubb to team with Myles Garrett. They could also trade out if one of the quarterbacks drops to 4. and by definition, one of them has to. So if somebody wants to trade up and give away sort of another future first-round pick to get one of those quarterbacks, I could see them trading out and keep adding to their, well-stocked bin of assets.
Right.
But no doubt if they stay there, the player they're going to take is Bradley Chubb.
For the Eagles fans out there listening, I know you did a full Eagles mock draft. Give a couple of names that they should keep their eyes on if they're still awake at 11:30 tonight and they're on the board.
Well, I think, as I mentioned, Van Der Esch, I think you have to look at the running backs if they are available and they are going to pick, although, when Howie talked about that fifth-year option, that's not necessarily a position you want a fifth-year option at. So I think running back is more likely to trade back. And if you look at offensive tackle, I think Mike McGlinchey is going to be probably the surprise of this draft besides Baker Mayfield going one. I don't think he belongs in the top 10, but I think he's going to go in the top 10.
Right.
So then you start looking at guys like Colton Miller from UCLA and Connor Williams, tackles like that who could be around at 32. But as I said, plan A, B, and C, you're probably going to be disappointed because they're going to get to 32 and the announcement's going to be the Eagles have traded out.
John, your prediction, do we get a flurry of movement at the top, or do you think now that everyone's pretty locked in?
No, I think we're going to see movement. I think there's no question whether it's Buffalo, Denver, Arizona, somebody's going to move up to get a quarterback. So I think that's going to be sort of a big earthquake in the top 10. And the Giants are key to it all. I don't think there's any doubt about it now. The Giants would like to move out. Their assumption is they need help in a lot of places, which is correct. That part of it is correct. So the issue is whether they can get value for the second overall pick, and this is the year you can get value. So up the turnpike, they're going to be debating this for years because you and I, Mike, have talked about it a lot.
Yep.
37-year-old quarterback, and you're right there to get the heir apparent. And I don't know if the Giants are going to do it.
John, I'm kind of curious, going back to the topic of trades and then kind of how it relates to the Eagles. I've seen the chart that they use, the GMs tend to have in terms of figuring out value. Can the Eagles get 2 second-round picks for their first, or is a second and a third more likely? At what point, if there is a trade made, does John McMullen say that was a good value or not?
No, you're not. You're not going to get 2 second-round picks for the 32nd pick. Generally, the value of that pick is more of, and I talked about it earlier in the week. Mason Rudolph is that 6th quarterback. If somebody wants to go up and get him, that's where you really, really have a value with that 5th-year option. And teams will overpay for quarterbacks. If they're just looking for a position player, the Eagles are probably going to move back into the second round and potentially get an extra pick in the third round, late third round, early fourth round. It's difficult at that spot to get a ton in return. But remember, Howie Roseman, we talked about Michael Kendricks, throw Ronald Darby in there, and despite the extension, and guess what? Throw Nick Foles in there as well. Because if somebody doesn't get the quarterback they want, you never know. There could be desperation from that aspect.
All right, John McMullen, of course, we'll recap everything that happens on tomorrow's show. The draft tonight. Coverage begins at 7 o'clock. Follow John on Twitter at JFMcMullen for everything that happens with the Eagles and tonight's NFL draft. Thank you, John.
Thank you, guys.